About 50 years ago, an astronaut returning from the moon experienced things that he couldn't find a scientific explanation for. So, with some colleagues, he launched a new science focused on the mind and how it works in the body and across space and time. It's the field of Noetics, where the tools of modern science are used to help us understand how what we think and feel affects us and the world around us. Now, this is Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments from the studios of KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon.
This is Noetic Moments, where we explore the field of research that discovers what consciousness is, what it does, how it works, and how our lives could be very different if we understood it better. I'm Ruth Miller, a longtime student of consciousness, cybernetics, and anthropology, and through this series of programs, I'm introducing some of the people whose work has defined this field of research, and I'm explaining some of their ideas and experiments. I'll also explore relevant news items and answer questions that you send to my email address, ruth@noeticmoments.org. Well, it's been 10 months since we started this exploration. Exploring the research of scientists trying to understand what consciousness is and what it does. And those first few months were looking back at what was done in the 20th century. Lately, we've been looking more at what's being done now. We learned that most of what goes on in mind is not in our conscious awareness at all, but goes on in unconscious processes. So our minds can be thought of as having three parts: what we're aware of, our personal awareness, that is what the doctor or the psychologist or the medic is looking for when they're saying, "Are you conscious?" But there's also what we aren't aware of that's keeping our bodies going, which also includes our fears and beliefs about potential dangers, which we call the individual subconscious, and what we aren't aware of that guides us in our actions, which we can call the individual superconscious. We learned that while we can say where in the brain processes that direct the body show up, the responses in our body to both our individual mental activity and what's going on around us happen far faster than nerve impulses or chemicals can travel through the body, which means they are not originating from the brain. So it turns out that many of the scientists doing this research have come to accept that what we call mind is not the product of the electrochemical activity of the brain, but is in fact the product of a kind of field that surrounds and permeates the body and then sends a signal to the brain. Mind, then, is a field, a pattern of informed energy that exists prior to and after the brain is functioning. That's the superconscious aspect of our consciousness. It develops with the body and brain as the subconscious, and is being told by the brain what the world out there is like, which is our personal awareness. Now, a field is a unique pattern of vibrations that makes each field different from other fields. And some experiments have demonstrated that people and some animals who have minds that are vibrating along the same pattern are able to sense when the other is focusing attention on them or about to come home. So if two people or a person and a beloved pet are connected or resonating, their bodies change when someone they're connected with turns attention their way. That means that the brain, operating as a receiver-transmitter, or technically a transponder, is receiving messages from the mind, which apparently is not limited to an individual but shared among a resonant field of minds, and transmitting those messages to the body, and receiving messages from the senses, and transmitting those messages to the body and mind, modifying the message along the way to fit the brain's pre-existing patterns of connections. And experiments have demonstrated that what we call the individual mind continues to function, even when the brain and heart are flatlined and the person has been declared dead. The experiments are demonstrating that mind continues to perceive and process for as much as several hours before the brain and heart return to functioning again. Beyond all that, we understand that the basic building blocks of the universe show up as energy or matter, depending on whether a mind is present to observe them, as demonstrated in the famous double-slit experiments in quantum physics. So all of that means that our mind not only shapes our perceptions of the world around us and the way the body responds to the world, it also helps to determine what forms show up in the world around us as the fundamental building blocks, those subatomic units that make up the quantum field that is everywhere present throughout the universe, take different forms depending on what consciousness is observing them. All of this together means that bodies and environments shift and change as people change their thought processes, what they're focusing on in the personal awareness part of their consciousness. And it also explains what's called the placebo effect, how the belief of a care provider in a treatment can help a patient receiving that treatment experience healing. So based on all of that, a growing number of scientists are seeing our individual fields of mind as part of a larger field, a noosphere, a global brain, a collective consciousness. And more scientists are equating that larger field with the quantum field, or zero-point field, out of which all matter and energy arises in this orderly system we call the universe. So that then helps to explain how the shared field of our humanity, our human mind, our shared human consciousness, our noosphere, affects the behavior of computer networks around the world, as in the Global Consciousness Project. And by extension, then, all electronic and electrical systems everywhere, in our bodies and in our power grids and in the natural world we are part of. Our personal experience, then, is always a product of past and current mental and emotional processes, which happen in a field that surrounds and permeates our bodies and are transmitted to smaller fields directly in the body associated with organs. And in the brain, they are turned into the words and thoughts we say and into nerve signals and hormones that affect the body's state and activity. So the more we can be aware of what's happening, what's going on in the interface between mind and between brain and body, the healthier and more effective we can be, and the more wonderful our experience of the world becomes. You can catch up on these past shows on the KXCR.net archives. There's a little cloud up on the banner if you don't see the archives button. And on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where you'll also find links to the clips, books, and authors that I mention on the show. Now today, we're going to look at the remarkable group of researchers who make up the Heartmath Institute and what they're recommending in the world today. For over 30 years, they've used all kinds of measuring devices to understand what the heart does and how it relates to the brain, the body, and the world around us. And for over a decade, they've been encouraging people to take on or to experience or to allow something they call the state of coherence. We talked about it a few months back, but now I'll let them tell you about it.
The Heartmath tools and techniques really help you access the intelligence of the heart so we can make better choices in the moment and really navigate these stressful times. What we hear from people across the world, across all professions, is that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm are really out of hand. And a lot of this is due to so much change that's happening. And the way our brains work, we don't like change. Humans do not like change, especially unexpected change or change that we're not in control of. And as it turns out, one of the most effective ways to really reduce stress and anxiety, and even feelings of overwhelm, is to learn how to to access the intelligence of the heart and shift the rhythms of the heart, which sends a different neural message to the brain. So one aspect of our research is really focused on developing simple, practical, user-friendly tools and techniques that allow people to really manage their stress. So a lot of people, probably even today, if you think about it, have had a situation where you were being told to do something or you wanted something, but there was a deeper sense or a deeper feeling that it's probably not the best choice. So that's what I mean by that lack of alignment. And that can really be a huge source of stress for people until they learn how to really get the alignment between the heart and brain, which is where coherence comes in. That's when the heart, mind, and emotions are aligned and working together harmoniously. Our basic research done here at the Heartmath Research Center focused more on the physiology of how the heart and brain communicate. Interestingly, a lot of people are surprised to learn that the heart sends more information through the nervous system to the brain than the other way around. And that sounds like some new discovery, but it's not. This has actually been known since the late 1800s. It's basic physiology. But this is important because the quality of these signals sent from the heart to the brain have profound effects on brain function, our mental clarity, even our emotional experience. So the brain is largely interpreting the signals from the heart to create how we feel. So this is why we focus on the heart so much, because if you can shift the rhythms of the heart, you can quickly improve brain function, reduce feelings of anxiety, stress, overwhelm, and so on. But it takes a different doorway, the heart. So the HeartMath tools and techniques are really designed to shift the rhythms of the heart, which changes the ascending information from the heart to the brain, which is absolutely necessary in order to establish a new baseline. And without establishing a new baseline, we really can't, it's impossible to have sustained change or improvements in our health and our emotional experience. So when we get our systems coherent and have the alignment between heart and brain, that's really when we access that deeper intuition that we have within, inner guidance. So we have a new sense of clarity in a lot of decisions that can seem complex otherwise.
That was the voice of senior researcher at the Heartmath Institute, Roland McCraty, who has been the voice of the Heartmath Institute more often than not over the last several decades. And he is providing there a series of explanations of why it's so important that the heart and the brain be synchronized. We haven't talked too much about that, a little bit on this show, because we've been more interested in the nature of consciousness. But he's assigning our emotional state to the activity of the heart and encouraging us to bring our emotions and our intellectual experience or our personal awareness into alignment. He's using the word coherence because if we allow ourselves to bring our emotional energy into a state of calm and peace, then the heart changes its pattern. So this mind that we are, as we shift it, it speaks not only to the brain, but also to the heart. And the emotions, the feeling aspect of being, are directly connected and received by the heart and then transmitted to the brain. Isn't that interesting? So our mental state then feeds information to the heart, which then shifts its functioning and its signal pattern, which then feeds information to the brain, which then generates other kinds of signals and chemicals so that the body as a whole can be brought into alignment. And that then is the state of coherence that they aim for through their work at the Heartmath Institute, among other things. And they've been doing further work. And over the last decade or so, they've been encouraging folks to go beyond individual coherence to what they call global coherence. I'll let them tell you about that.
Hear that? That is the Earth's resonance. You could say it's our song, or one of the many songs the Earth sings. The Global Coherence Initiative has shown that changes in the Earth's vibrating magnetic field and the amplitude of the Schumann resonances can influence the function of the human autonomic nervous system, brain and cardiovascular systems. And how do we measure that? The Global Coherence Monitoring System, GCMS, uses state-of-the-art sensing technology to observe changes in the Earth's magnetic field. As of 2020, sensor sites were operating around the clock in the following locations: Boulder Creek, California, USA; Hofuf, Saudi Arabia; Alberta, Canada; Baisogala, Lithuania; Northland region of New Zealand; and KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. GCI researchers hypothesized that when large numbers of humans respond to a global event with common emotional feeling, the collective response can affect the information distributed in the Earth's field. In cases where the event evokes negative responses, this can be thought of as a planetary stress wave. And in cases where a positive response is created, it creates a global uplifting coherence wave.
So the Heartmath Institute has set up measuring devices around the planet to determine what the vibrations of the field of the planet are at any given time, and to correlate with the Global Consciousness Project what the human mental field, our shared consciousness, is experiencing at any time, to see what the relationships are. So far, they've found that the Schumann's resonances, which are the electrical vibrations bouncing back between the higher levels of the atmosphere and the Earth's surface, which were discovered in 1958 by Mr. Schumann, they've found that these Schumann's resonances seem to correlate with the various kinds of responses in the Global Consciousness Project. They've also found that sunspot activity correlates with major worldwide experiences, major wars, major decisions or confrontations over the course of history. You can find all that information on the heartmath.org website, heartmath.org/GCI/research. They've got charts. They've got all kinds of pretty pictures and videos that explain what they're doing and how they're doing it on that site. And you can see actually in real live time what the current Schumann's resonances are, what the current sunspot activity is, and the output of the Global Consciousness Project. Now, we talked about the Global Consciousness Project a while back, but just to give you an update or a reminder, it's a group of people in Princeton, New Jersey, that were part of Princeton University, who set up a network of individual computers around the world that are tied together through the internet, and they each generate something called a random number sequence. That is, they have a program in the computer that generates without any preset algorithm, first a 1 and then a 7 and then a 3 and whatever, or in most cases it's ones and zeros, just alternating between ones and zeros on a random basis. Normally, all those computers are sending back random numbers. But it turns out that when events are happening that affect a significant number of people, those random numbers start moving more in one direction or another. We'll get a lot of ones or a lot of zeros. And that is charted on walls at the Global Consciousness Project in Princeton, and they have bells that go off when significant deviations from randomness occur in any or all of these computers. The Global Consciousness Project was made famous shortly after 9/11/2001 because when the Twin Towers in New York were attacked by passenger airplanes and the world began to hear about it, the deviation from randomness went off the charts. They literally had to print a different kind of paper in order to find out how far it went. So, yes, we have computers that understand when humanity is going bonkers, or at least respond. So if your computer acts up when you're emotionally upset, now you know why. All right, so back to the Global Coherence Project. What the Heartmath Institute is aiming for is the possibility that the Earth's field, as measured by these Schumann's resonances, and the magnetic field that is affected by the solar radiation, can also be affected by collective response in human consciousness in the same way that the computer random number generators are. And their goal is to help us as humanity begin to bring a state of calm and harmony and peace to the planet as we enter into the state of coherence individually, and then ultimately reduce the stress that is being experienced by beings everywhere on this beautiful planet we call home, Earth. All right, well, now is the time that we usually look at a book. Continuing with our focus on the Heartmath Institute and their research, we're going to look at a book called The Heartmath Solution, written by Doc Childre and Howard Martin, two of the members of the research staff at Heartmath Institute, with Donna Beach. The book came out a number of years ago in order to help people make use of the tools that they had begun to create and had tested over several decades even at that point. So the first version of this book was 1999, and that had several other titles along the way. Well, I'm going to give you some chapter headings. Chapter 1, Beyond the Brain, the Intelligent Heart. Chapter 2, The Ultimate Partnership. Chapter 3, The Risks of Incoherence. Chapter 4, Freeze Frame. This is the tool that most people have used over the last 20 years to help them shift from being stressed and anxious and upset to getting back into that state that is more like coherence. Chapter 5, Energy Efficiency. Chapter 6, At the Heart's Core, the Power Tools of the Heart. And this is more tools that you can use. Part 3, they're calling Advanced Heart Intelligence. Chapter 7 is Understanding the Mystery of Emotions. Chapter 8 is Care versus Overcare. Chapter 9, Cut Through to Emotional Maturity. And Chapter 10, what they call Heart Lock-In. Scientific research, it says in the introduction, will be presented that reveals an intelligence residing within the heart and shows how the heart communicates with the brain and the rest of the body. This research has shown that when heart intelligence is engaged, it can lower blood pressure, improve nervous system and hormonal balance, and facilitate brain function. In order, it goes on, for the mind, emotions, and body to perform at their best, the heart and brain must be harmony with one another. Learning to align these two integrated but separate sources of intelligence is an important part of what this book is about. So in the book, The Heartmath Solution, we're seeing the early tools, but really fundamental tools that are offered for people to be able to experience the power of the results of the research that was going on at the Heartmath Institute through the 80s and 90s. Now, the paperback version of this was published in 2011. So the Heartmath Solution, and Doc Childre is spelled Childre, and Howard Martin with Donna Beach. Very useful. If you just tuned in, you are listening to Noetic Moments on KXCR 90.7 on the FM dial and streaming on KXCR.net. And that sound tells me we need to look at what's going on in the world today, or what you, the listeners, are curious about. One of the questions that came up in the past week or so has to do with what is prayer and how does prayer work? And I'd like to say, we've sort of been talking about it all along without talking about it. So I will address it today. Prayer, as I wrote in a little book called Uncommon Prayer, is a state of being. It's not words. It's not what we are wishing for or longing for. It's not particular rituals. It is a state of being that those rituals, those words, those wishing fors can help us get to. Now, it happens that the state of being that is prayer is very closely aligned with the state of being that the Heartmath Institute calls coherence, which is why I'm happy to talk about it today. When we are in the state of prayer, literally all of our thoughts, all of our body processes, all of our emotions, all of the things that we are looking at, thinking about, and focusing on are all in alignment. There is nothing distracting us, outside us, from the experience of being in union with that part of us that is accessing the, if you all want to call it, the field, the quantum field, the all that is, the source out of which we emerge. When we are in that state of being, then whatever we have focused on immediately prior to being in that state of being is most likely to come into our experience. Now, Deepak Chopra called that state of being the gap. And he said, you be clear about your intention. You enter into that state in which all that exists is the beingness, the isness of being. And then that which you have held in intention is beginning to emerge in form in the quantum field. It has begun. The matter and energy that is going to be whatever it is that we have called forth with our intention. All of our feelings, all of our thoughts, all of our attention in that space. So one of the things we want to be sure about, if we enter into the state of prayer, doing more than saying words and going through rituals, being fully aligned with every aspect of our being in that moment with the all that is, the unlimited possibility, then we best be clear that our intention is something that is for the benefit of all. And so it truly is, indeed. Well, that's it for today's show. The next time we get together, we'll look at more of the research being done in an attempt to understand what consciousness is, what it really does, and how we can experience life differently when we use it fully. We are out of time for today, but remember you can always continue the exploration on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where there is a list of past shows, along with links to titles and other resources that we refer to on the show, and where you can send me your comments and questions, which I'll do my best to get answered the next time we're on the air. For now, thanks for joining me here on Noetic Moments at KXCR Community Radio, 90.7 FM in Florence, Oregon. And have a wonderful week.
You've been listening to Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments. This program is produced in the studios of KXCR Community Radio in beautiful Florence, Oregon, supported by you, our listeners. Our theme music is Tumbling Planets, composed and performed by Jeff Lovejoy. To hear this program again or learn more about Noetic sciences, search our website, www.noeticmoments.org.